Thanks for joining us again on Income Stacker, where we talk about building passive income. Today we're going to talk about partial mortgage notes. So this is an introduction to the partial notes. What's a partial note? How does it work? And what benefits are there for the buyer and seller of these notes? So let's get started. So a quick overview. So the partial purchase of a note is an extremely powerful tool available for both the note buyer and seller. Both buyers and sellers can benefit from this technique, and I'm going to go through the benefits of both. It is a great option to take it or leave it mentality with a typical full purchase note. So if you sell a note, typically you sell it all, right? It's all or nothing type of thing. With a partial, you can sell some of the payments and keep the rest for yourself as a note seller, and we'll get into that in a second. Also, it's a great way to recapitalize for the note seller, and it's a low risk, high return opportunity for the note buyer. So there's really benefits for both the buyer and seller. It is a true win-win, in my opinion, because I buy notes, partials, and I also sell partials. So I believe it works in both ways, just depending on what you're trying to do at the time. So what exactly is a partial note purchase? This is when someone purchases only a portion of the note and not the full note. So for example, let's say the note has 300 payments remaining, and instead of buying the entire 300 payments, you only buy the next 60 payments for a set dollar amount, right? And you can do the calculation and find out what your return will be based on that dollar amount, or you can back calculate into that based on the return you want. We're not going to talk about how to do the calculation today. We'll probably talk about that on a future video, but that's kind of how it works. After those payments are made, the note reverts back to the original note seller for the remaining, 240 payments, right? So 300 minus 60 is 240 left. So that note seller gets the next 240 payments after that, and they're in full control of the note again. So that, in a nutshell, is what a partial purchase is. You're purchasing a portion of the note, and then the note goes back to the original owner for the rest. Now, that's the typical, what we call a straight partial. There are different types of partials. This is the one that's most common out there. There are other types of partials. So the straight partial is what we just talked about, where you purchase a certain number of payments, and the seller keeps the back end of the remaining future payments or possibly a balloon. A split payment partial is where the purchase of a portion of each payment for a specific time period and amount, with the seller receiving the remainder. So just give you an example. Let's say someone's paying $800 a month, and you agree to give the partial buyer 400 of it, and you keep the other 400. So you can each get a portion of the 800, or any combination thereof, right? It could be 500 and 300, or 600 and 200, or whatever it may be. So that's what's called a split payment partial. Finally, another one is a balloon split partial. Here, the purchase of immediate payments up to and including a portion of the balloon, with the seller retaining a portion of the balloon payment. So again, there's a lot of different ways to structure these things, but again, the most common is the first one there, the straight partial. But sometimes you can, or the split partial. The balloon, I really haven't done many of those. But again, there's a lot of different ways to kind of slice the pie, and these are some of the different ways. So what are the benefits of a partial? So we're going to talk about the benefits to the seller and the benefits to the buyer. And again, it depends where you're at. As I said at the beginning, I've purchased partials and I've sold partials. So it really depends on where you're at in your note buying business. So one of the benefits to a seller, it gives the seller choices based on needs. So, if you have a $100,000 note, instead of selling the whole thing, and you only need, let's say, 30 grand, let's say you need to put your kid through college or something, you only need 30, but you want to keep the back end of the note. So you basically sell only $30,000 of the note and keep the rest. And in this way, it also minimizes the discount to the seller. So usually the discount's larger when selling the full note versus a partial. Okay, just in general. Again, these are not absolutes. This is just in general what we see. Also, the seller can participate in future payments since the note reverts back to the seller when the buyer collects their designated number of payments. So if, let's say I sell $30,000 worth and get $30,000 from the note buyer, and then after they make those payments or collect those payments, I get the note back and I collect the remainder of the note. So that's something that some people like. Also, there's an opportunity to sell another portion in the future since you now establish a relationship with the note buyer. So let's say you sell off $30,000, then later come back and say, hey, I really need another 30 or another 40 or 20 or whatever it may be. You can do that. And really, it's a shared risk for both buyer and seller, and that's actually a benefit to the buyers and the sellers. So we look at the benefits to the buyer. Usually the investment to value, or ITV, investment to value, reduces the risk and exposure to the buyer, right? Because let's take a look at the one example we just talked about, where we're buying only $30,000 instead of the whole $100,000 note. $30,000 of, let's say it's a $150,000 property. That's a lot lower risk, right? 30 divided by 150 versus 100 divided by 150. So the investment to value is reduced, so less risk typically. Also, residual income opportunity. What do I mean by that? The note seller may become the repeat customer, right? So as a buyer, you might, again, as I spoke on the last slide, it might happen over and over again. Also, you can typically structure higher yields since the seller is happy to get the back end of the note. So usually instead of saying, hey, here's $80,000 for your $100,000 note, instead you are basically buying off portions of it, and you can structure a little bit higher yields for you, the note buyer, since they're happy that they're going to get the note back and they're going to get the back end of the note and collect payments in the future. So that's just another way to think about it. It also limits the amount of money invested, right? So if I'm spending 30 grand versus 80 to 100 grand to buy the full note, well, that's going to be quite a bit of difference. And it also, in turn, reduces my risk and also spreads my risk among more notes. So let's say instead of just investing, again, going back to the one where I'm investing $30,000, well, I can do that 3 times instead of buying the whole note for $90,000, right? So now I'm spreading my risk over several properties instead of just one property. So it shortens the term for the buyer. They're not stuck in one note, and it spreads the buyer's risk among more notes. So let's take a look at an example. And again, I'm not going through the math. I'm just giving you an example of how it looks like. So if you look at a full and a partial sale examples here. So in a full, so let's say you sell a full note. Let's say the note has a balance of $80,000 and 9% interest, payable in monthly installments of $1,013.40 with 120 months remaining. Then the seller will sell all 120 remaining payments of $1,013.40 to the investor at whatever price they agree upon, and it would be considered a full purchase. You're selling the whole entire note. Now, you could buy that note at 70, you could buy it at 60, you could buy it at 80 at par. That's up to you and the seller, and that's how that works. So that's a full. Now, a partial happens to be where if the investor, let's say they only purchase the next 48 months of the $1,013.40, and this would be considered a straight partial purchase. They're only purchasing a certain number of payments, and then the note goes back to the original note seller. Once the investor receives the next 4 years of payments, or 4 times 12 is 48 payments, then the note would be reassigned back to the seller, and the seller would collect the remaining 72 payments, right? Because there was 120 in all, so 72 plus 48 is 120. So this is kind of how it works. Again, Probably go into the math of that and how to calculate the yields and the returns depending on how much you pay in another video. But right now we just wanted to give a big picture introduction to partial notes. Hopefully that helps. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me at randy@incomestacker.com, or check us out on our website and sign up for our YouTube videos like this one, and we'll see you on the next video.